Hey guys, welcome to the MMA Breakdown. This is my prediction video for UFC Fight Night 53, Nelson versus Story, taking place in Stockholm, Sweden. This is a UFC Fight Pass event, and just as I usually feel about most of the previous Fight Pass cards, I think this one's pretty terrible. Not the main event, of course, and not the co-main event either. And some guys, a couple of guys that I'm interested in seeing again, Nicholas Backstrom, but this preliminary card here, just a bunch of newcomers, and that's what they usually do with these Fight Pass cards, and I'm not a fan of it. And especially guys like Dennis Siver, and Ilir Latifi, especially Dennis Seaver being the veteran. Why are they burying him on this prelim card against a newcomer that no one's ever heard of? Especially, being a top 10 guy in his division doesn't make any sense to me. But actually, as I say that, I just remembered that I think Dennis Seaver's original opponent, I can't remember who that was, he pulled out pretty recently, I think. Yeah, Robert Whiteford. But still, even that isn't a great opponent for Dennis Seaver. But yeah, just a lot of crap on this card. And to make things worse, it's a doubleheader weekend. You have the McDonald versus Safadine, but at least that main card has some more meaningful fights on there. And I think that overall is the better card, but still both of these cards combined, I'm just not excited about it. It's too much MMA, and especially with all these newcomers, I'm just not interested in it, but I'm going to watch it anyway. Whatever that says about me, I don't know, but I'm still going to watch the cards. But let's get right to the predictions. Starting off with the preliminary card, the entire card, of course, streaming on Fight Pass. But the preliminary card at featherweight: Zubaira Tukhugov versus Ernest Chavez. Tukhugov, I had to look up his resume. I didn't recognize the name, and he beat Douglas Silva Andrade, I think, back in February. And honestly, I just don't remember that fight ever happening at all. I can't remember it at all. So really, I have nothing to say about Tukhugov. Don't remember his fight at all. But Ernest Chavez won in his debut against Dennis Cedeno, who's just coming off of a pretty good win. And then his last fight lost to Elias Silverio. And I remember him doing fairly well early in that fight. I think I gave him at least one round. I think it was the first. But until he got taken down and choked out, I thought he was doing pretty well. I think he's a fair striker. From what I remember of his fights, he has this kind of the striking style where he hops around the cage a lot, uses decent footwork, and hops in and hops out, landing, hops in to land a punch and gets back out of range. So I think, he's a decent fighter for the low level that he's at. And again, Tukhugov, I just don't remember anything about his fight. But I'm going to go with Chavez here. Just because he's a guy that I've paid attention to in this new era of, international expansion and bringing all these guys in. He's a guy that at least registers in my memory, and I don't think he's looked bad at all, really, in his couple of fights. So I'm going to take Chavez, but again, that's not knowing anything about Tukhugov. And one more thing I forgot to mention, this video should be pretty short, a lot shorter than my videos usually are. Same thing with the, well, not so much with the McDonald's Safting card, but with all these newcomers that I've never heard of, I don't know anything about, we're going to move through this pretty quickly, hopefully, so that's a good thing. And moving on to a welterweight fight, Mairbek Taisumov taking on Marcin Bandal. And again, Bandal newcomer, don't know anything about him. Mairbek Taisumov, though, he's had 2 fights in the UFC. He fought on the first Fight Pass card, I believe, against Tai Hyun Bang. Won a decision and just seemed to have decent kickboxing. And I don't think that fight went to the ground much. I don't quite remember, though. But then in his second fight, he got upset, or at least I think it was an upset to many of the fans. Lost to Michel Prazeres. I actually took Prazeres in that fight, though. Just got out-grappled and out-wrestled by Prazeres. So, and I think there's a lot of hype around Taisumov. I mean, I didn't know anything about him before the UFC, but you know, based on his 2 fights, again, for, you know, a lower level fighter in the UFC these days, I think he looks average, decent. And again, don't know anything about Marcin Bandal, so I'm just gonna skip over this fight and not make a pick. But you know, Taisumov, I think could, you know, as he improves, I think he could be a decent fighter. Middleweight, Troen, veteran of Tough 17, taking on Krzysztof Jotko. And I'm taking Joko in this fight. Troen losing to, getting knocked out by Josh Saman in the house. And in the UFC, had a submission win over fellow Tough castmate Adam, what was that guy's name? Adam Sella. And then lost to Rafael Natal in a fairly competitive match, actually. He had some good grappling exchanges with Natal, and I thought that really raised his stock. But then in his last fight, taking on Trevor Smith, just got out-wrestled and held down, and really didn't have enough time. Couldn't stay on his feet for long enough to make anything happen. And after that fight, losing to Trevor Smith, for me, his stock went back down, and wasn't too impressed with that. Krzysztof Joko, on the other hand, won a decision against Bruno Santos in his debut in a fight that I actually thought he should have lost. Really just got held up against the cage, Santos trying to take him down, and I think he was successful a few times. But really not much happened in that fight. That was a very boring, uneventful fight. But then his last fight against Magnus Seedenblad, looked pretty solid on the feet, seemed to have solid boxing, good forward movement with his striking, and was beating Seedenblad on the feet before getting caught in a guillotine choke. I think he was even trying to take Seedenblad down against the fence, and I think that's how he got caught in a guillotine choke right at the end of the second round. But I thought he looked solid on the feet, and I think Seedenblad is another decent mid-level fighter. So I'm going to take Joko here. Troan just hasn't really impressed too much with his loss to Trevor Smith, and even against Rafael Natal, who I think has looked worse over his last couple of fights. So I'm taking Joko here. I think he'll win a decision. I think he'll win it on the feet. And moving on, another welterweight fight. Cathal Pendred taking on Ghassan Umalatov, and I'm just gonna say this. Cathal Pendred, I don't think he's a good fighter. The Irish fans, I said that in my prediction video for the Dublin card, something to that effect, and I think a lot of the hype around this guy is just Irish pride. On Tough, last season of Tough 19, his only attack, his only method of attack in the tough house against both the guys he fought, Eddie Gordon and Hector Urbina, was just trying to push them up against the cage and hold them there. Really didn't open up with any striking. Seemed really unsuccessful in trying to get the fight to the ground. A lot of it was just attempting the takedown, pressing them up against the fence, and I wasn't impressed with it at all. And then on the Dublin card, his first fight in the UFC, taking on fellow castmate Mike King, he nearly got knocked out in that first round. And Mike King, I thought if he wasn't so caught up in the moment, being in Dublin and hurting this guy, just expending all of his energy trying to finish him. Mike King gassed out, and Pendred in that second round did a great job to recover and was able to get the fight to the ground, got the rear naked choke, but Mike King instantly went to sleep as soon as that choke was locked in, and I really think that was just Mike King not fighting smart, not being able to stay composed. But other than that, I mean, Cathal Pendred, he just hasn't shown a striking game, hasn't shown to be a good wrestler, and nearly got knocked out by Mike King. So I'm not impressed with him. Ghassan Umalatov, not impressed either. Another really low-level fighter. Lost to Neil Magny in his debut, who is a good mid-level prospect. But against Magny, he just couldn't get on the inside. Magny kept him at bay with his jab. And then he fought Paulo Thiago in a very slow-paced fight, where Umalatov just outstruck him in a very kind of unconvincing way and clinched up with him. I think dragged him down to the ground a few times, but really didn't do anything that impressive. And if Cathal Pendred fights like he did here, on Tough here, trying to clinch guys, run them into the fence, winning on position, that kind of thing, I think Umalatov might be physically stronger and might be able to, squeak out a win there in that kind of fight. But if Cathal Pendred opens up with his offense, Umalatov just seems like a very low pace, inactive fighter, meaning it doesn't really generate too much offense. So I don't know who to pick. Gosh, I think I'm going to go with Umalatov, and I think he gets it done with control in the clinch and, spending more time on top on the ground. But really, I don't know. Very close. But I'm going to go with Umalatov. Next up at featherweight, Dennis Siver taking on Taylor Lapolis. Newcomer that I've never heard of, and he's supposed to take on Rob Whiteford, like I said, but even that, I mean, is not a very interesting fight for a top 10 guy like Siver. I would think that the UFC would want to get more out of him, at least building up another guy on the rise, if you could get a win over Siver and not just giving him Lapolis or even Whiteford. But I'll take Dennis Siver. I usually don't make picks for in fights where one of the fighters is a newcomer, a guy I don't know. But I mean, I feel pretty confident Siver, longtime veteran, and coming down to featherweight, I didn't even think he looked that impressive in his couple of wins against Diego Nunez and Nam Phan. Or he looked good against Nam Phan, but I mean, Nam Phan is not a measuring stick. If you can get past him, he's not a gatekeeper at all at featherweight. But when he took on Cub Swanson, actually, I was really impressed. He he was beating Cub Swanson for a round and a half. Easily took that first round. Just had his he had his rhythm going on the feet. Was able to outstrike Swanson and took him down, and just seemed really strong, and was able to just hold Swanson down. Just seemed way stronger and way more suffocating with his ground game than we'd ever really seen him against a high-level guy like Swanson, and eventually was overwhelmed by Swanson as the fight went on and was finished in that fight. But after that fight, he had a win over Manny Gamburian, where he never really came close to finishing him, but pretty clearly outstruck him. And, Siver always has that spinning back kick in his arsenal. Has power in his hands on occasion, and I think if Lapolis pulls this out for any newcomer, he'd have to be a pretty special fighter, which could be the case. But not knowing him, I'm going to take Siver. I think he gets it done. Moving on, welterweight fight: Nico Musoke taking on Alexander Yakovlev. Alexander Yakovlev came in taking on Damian Maia in his debut. Really tall task, and didn't look terrible in that fight. But Damian Maia dropped him in the first round, which probably isn't a good sign. Maia has improved his striking over the years, but I think they said that was the first time that Maia ever dropped anyone, and Maia pretty much out-grappled him. Even I think he got mount a few times, but wasn't able to really come close with any submission. So I don't know. Yakovlev was tough enough to hang in there with a guy like Maia, but I think he made a little comeback at the end. But I don't know. I wasn't too impressed with him. And Nico Musoke, I've actually been impressed with him over his last couple of fights. In his first fight, taking on Alessio Sakara, getting rocked early, was able to submit him with an armbar. Then against Tough Brazil veteran Viscardi Andrade, again, same thing, got dropped in that first round, but proceeded to win the fight with pretty technical and crafty grappling. Seems really, a good positional grappler on the ground, and a good control guy. Was really able to easily grapple the Brazilian Viscardi Andrade. And against Kelvin Gastelum, Musoke was actually the one who came out really strong in that first round. Really almost dominated Gastelum. Didn't really hurt him, but was able to get a slam on him, I believe, and out-clinch him, and I think he took his back on the ground as well. I'm not certain about that, but he looked very good in that first round, but then couldn't keep that pace second and third round, and Gastelum outworked him, outboxed him. But I thought that first round against Gastelum really showed that he is, top 25 welterweight, I think. And I'm going to take him to win this fight. Just seems very composed on the ground. Like I said, good control, good grappling. I think he gets this done here, and I just haven't seen enough from Yakovlev with that one fight against Maia to think that he's going to beat Musoke here. So I'm going to take Musoke by decision. Next up, last prelim fight at middleweight, Magnus Seedenblad taking on another newcomer that I don't know anything about, Scott Asam. And I'm not going to make a pick here, not like I did with Dennis Siver and Lapolis, because Dennis Siver is a top 10 guy in the division and has been around a long time, fought a lot of guys at lightweight before that. Magnus Seedenblad, on the other hand, has only had a handful of fights in the UFC. I think he took on Francis Carmon in his debut, mounted him at one point, but ended up getting choked out. And then in his fights after that, I know he beat Joko in his last fight. Oh, he also had a win over Jared Hammond, where he submitted him very quickly with a guillotine choke in the first round. So I think he's a decent, decent prospect for kind of an upper level, lower level guy, kind of beginning mid level guy in the UFC. Obviously has some submission ability, but again, I don't know anything about Scott Askham, so I wouldn't be comfortable just picking Seedenblad just based on 3 fights in the UFC. But I do think he's a decent talent, but I'm not gonna make a pick here. So moving on to the main card. And this fight is actually, I think, aside from the main and co-main event, the really only meaningful fight, and the one guy I'm really excited to see again. Nicholas Backstrom taking on tough smashes veteran Mike Wilkinson, and I got to go with Backstrom. I mean, just an incredible performance in his last fight in Germany, in Berlin, taking on Tom Ninamaki. Got taken down right at the start of that fight, but got back up, rocked Ninamaki with a knee to the chin, didn't even have the tie clinch, just a standing knee, and submitting him with that bulldog choke. Very impressive. And Mike Wilkinson on tough smashes, I remember being impressed with his win there. He had a submission win over I don't know what the guy's name was, Gary, I think, something. And I was actually looking forward to seeing him, advance in the show, but I think he got injured and wasn't able to, go to the next round. But then took on Honey Jason, or actually fought another castmate, I think, Brendan Lockney, in the Tough Nations finale, and that was kind of a stalemate fight. Very few strikes thrown throughout the fight. Uneventful kickboxing match, but he got the decision there, and then he fought Honey Jason about a year and a half ago, and got submitted in the first round. I think Honey Jason pulled guard, or I don't know if he was taken down, but easily locked up the triangle and submitted Wilkinson. So, and also a year and a half layoff for Wilkinson, so another thing to consider. And I just got to go with Backstrom, looking so impressive against Tom Ninamaki, who had some hype beating Hani Yahya in his debut. So going with Backstrom, I think he gets a finish here. Look for him to impress big time. Moving on to light heavyweight, Ilir Latifi taking on another newcomer that, again, don't know anything about, Jan Blachowicz. I know I must be mispronouncing that, but not a fan of this matchmaking at all. I think the UFC is really just feeding Ilir Latifi nobodies, really just set up fights. Wasn't the case obviously with his first couple of fights in the UFC. Filling in short notice against Gegard Mousasi, and even though didn't really come close to getting finished in that fight, I wasn't really impressed with Latifi. But then submitting Cyril Diabate in the first round with a guillotine, I thought that was good. But then his last fight, they just fed him this nobody, Chris Dempsey, I think. And that was another Fight Pass card, wasn't it? That was the Dublin card, I think. Yeah, that was the Dublin card. And I think Dempsey had like 4 fights on his record, and just seemed kind of this slightly out of shape light heavyweight from I think it was from Pennsylvania or something, just like a regional nobody, and Latifi knocked him out in the first round. And I don't know about Jan Blachowicz. I don't know anything about him at all. Just looking at his record, has a win and a loss to Sokaju, and a win over Alexander Houston. But I mean, Ilir Latifi, a guy who's shown to have, obviously some talent, some finishing ability. I think they've got to, give this guy some more meaningful fights, not just keep him fighting nobodies on these Fight Pass cards. But not going to make a pick here. I would expect Latifi to look better and, have, has power in his hands. But I just don't know anything about Blachowicz, so I'm going to avoid making a pick here. And moving on to featherweight, Akira Corasani, veteran of Tough 14, taking on Max Holloway. I'm taking Max Holloway. Max Holloway is just super underrated. Very talented fighter. I was sold on Conor McGregor after he beat Max Holloway because I thought Holloway was going to win that fight. And even at that point in Holloway's career, I thought he was already very impressive. I mean, you see how good Dennis Bermudez is doing these days, and Max Holloway was robbed out of a decision win against Dennis Bermudez. Really dominated him with striking and defended the takedowns first 2 rounds, and then lost the 3rd round. I mean, Holloway's a stud, very unorthodox and technical striker. Took on Dustin Poirier in his debut. I mean, he has just been very impressive. Has several finishes in the UFC, and has really, he's fought a lot in the almost 3 years that he's been in the UFC. This is his 10th fight, I think, but. Should have gotten that win over Dennis Bermudez, and then lost to Conor McGregor. You see Conor McGregor's knocking all these guys out in the first round, and Holloway went the distance with him. But then since then, has a 3-fight win streak, finishing Will Chope, Andre Fili, submitting him, and then getting the ground and pound TKO over Clay Collard in his last fight. Gets stronger as the fight goes on. Dangerous in that 3rd round, which is really kind of a rare thing, and to me really shows that a guy's well conditioned and can really get stronger as the fight goes on, finishing Andre Fili and Collard in the 3rd round. Against Fili, it showed that he's adding submission abilities to his game, and just really an unorthodox and technical striker and aggressive striker on the feet, and does a great job of jumping on guys when he has them hurt. So I'm really high on Max Holloway, and I think he's going to be a contender pretty soon. I'll just say that I'm kind of concerned he's not getting the fights he needs, kind of like what I said about Ilir Latifi. But Ilir Latifi, in one sense, it's understandable because he's an attraction on these Fight Pass cards. But Holloway's been fighting for a long time and has racked up a lot of wins. I'd like to see him, get a step up. Will Chope and Andre Fili, impressive finishes over them, but low-level fighters really. And Clay Collard, a newcomer. He was supposed to take on Mirsad Bektic, also a newcomer. I just think Holloway's ready for that step up into the top 15, even in top 10, because featherweight's kind of thin outside of the top 5 or so. But I am taking Holloway here, and Akira Corasani, veteran of Tough 14. And aside from being a total dick on the show, I thought, has some, is lethal with his striking. I think he knocked the guy out to get in the house, and then got subbed by Dennis Bermudez. Also got tapped by Dustin Yeast, tapped to knee bar or a heel hook maybe. But I remember that in the house he actually tapped once, and the ref let the fight go on. And then since coming into the UFC, almost got knocked out by Andy Ogle in his fight. somehow won the decision there. And then against Robbie Peralta, I actually thought he had an impressive performance. Was really able to just stymie Peralta's wild brawling style of striking with just a pretty straightforward boxing attack. And then against Dustin Poirier stepping up. No, that wasn't short notice, but taking a huge step up to fight Dustin Poirier. Actually did fairly well, rocked Poirier in that fight, but eventually got knocked out in the second round himself. Also had a fight against Maximo Blanco, where Blanco landed an illegal knee and in the first round, and Corasani got the DQ win there. So kind of just a mixed bag, inconsistent performances. Has looked good and bad on the feet at times, and hasn't really shown an improved ground game, from being submitted twice really in the house. So I have to go with Holloway, who's just been incredibly impressive. Another thing to keep in mind, though, this will be Holloway's third fight since April. And it seems like they're doing that more these days. Kind of the Bellator approach, trying to get these guys as many fights in a short amount of time as possible. And, that could take a toll on him. But Holloway's super young. I think he's only 22, he's 22. And I just think he has a very bright future and will be a contender shortly. And I think he's going to knock out Corasani here. I'd say second round maybe, but Holloway for sure. I'll be very surprised if Corasani wins this fight. And now the main event, which is a fantastic fight. Don't think that because I think this card is shit, that I don't think this is a good main event. Real great matchmaking here, and I think this is exactly the guy that Gunnar Nelson needs to fight right now to move into the top 15, even the top 10. Gunnar Nelson versus Rick Story at welterweight. Gunnar Nelson, I was incredibly impressed with him up until his last fight against Zach Cummings, and still impressed with how he was able to get the finish. And obviously, once he gets the fight to the ground, super talented and capable of taking the back and finishing guys. He does it easily. He's had 4 fights in the UFC against DeMarcus Johnson. Came in, just ran through him. Was able to take him down. We saw a little bit of that karate stance early on, but took him down and just took his back and subbed him. He locks up that body triangle extremely quickly when he takes guys. When he takes their backs. But then against Jorge Santiago, we didn't get to see his wrestling. Really contested that fight on the feet and kind of looked like he wanted to prove a point with his striking more than just use his wrestling. And that wasn't too impressive. Santiago was able to land a few big haymakers on him. I think dropped him right at the end of the third round. But then after that, took on Omari Akhmedov and again looked fantastic. Just seems real composed, took him down, ground and pounded him, and locked up that guillotine choke. Looked great. But then against Zach Cummings, who, I just thought I wasn't a fan of that fight at all. I didn't think Cummings would be much of a challenge for him. But on the feet in that first round, Gunnar Nelson lost that first round, I thought, clearly. Some people were saying it was close, but I thought Zach Cummings really kind of bullied him in the clinch, was able to hold him up against the fence. And on the feet, Nelson just had trouble finding his range and really got outstruck in that first round and didn't find his rhythm until the second round. And I was just very kind of surprised that Cummings, who hadn't been terribly impressive. Had lost in the Tough House, Tough 17, and had a couple of wins in the UFC over other tough veterans who didn't do well in their seasons either. But he was really able to control range in that first round, and was physically imposing in the clinch in that first round before getting taken down. And again, was not impressed with Gunnar Nelson up to that point, but once he took Cummings down that second round, it's just it looks easy for him. Just goes right to that body triangle and locks in that rear naked choke. Now, how Zach Cummings was able to do well in that first round with the clinch, with that kind of not quite in close, not quite close range, but definitely not rangy striking either. That's exactly Rick Story's strengths. Fighting that kind of in close boxing, dirty boxing, and kind of a fighting in a style of attrition. Trying to bully guys and a lot of clinch work. That's where Rick Story is strong. Rick Story, I thought he was done a couple of years ago when he lost to Damian Maia, and before that had a win over Brock Jardine, where I thought he should have been more. I thought he should have finished him in that fight. Was dominant, but didn't really finish him. But I think he's gotten better over his last couple of fights. Really with his boxing, showed power against Quinn Mulher, knocked him out, and against Brian Ebersol, showed a real good boxing technique. Really good at throwing combinations, his good hand speed, and then against Leonardo Mafra in his last fight, showed some submission ability, which we hadn't seen from Story in a long time. So I think he's improving, rounding out his game, and also against Kelvin Gastelum. I thought Story got robbed in that fight. He did get dropped with a head kick, but that was a very competitive, close fight, and I thought Story won that. I thought he came back to control Gastelum, and seeing Cummings kind of exploit those holes in Nelson's stand-up in that first round. I think Story, that he can do exactly the same thing. And remember, Story is the only guy to have a win over Johnny Hendricks in his entire career. Story, he has good hands, good boxing, and I'm not sure that Cummings is that Gunnar Nelson's just going to be able to take down Rick Story at will. I mean, Story has some wrestling himself. Obviously, I don't think he's as talented a grappler as Nelson. But he is a strong, physically imposing guy, and very gritty, good at recovering when he gets hurt. And I think Nelson, I think he's going to go on to have a much more successful career than Story has had, getting closer to the top of the division. But I don't know if he's ready to beat Story right now. If he's able to take him down and get back control, I think he subs Story. But I don't know if he'll get there. And if he doesn't do that quickly in the first round, I think when Story, if he has time on the feet, I think he can box him up a bit and kind of just bully him and outwork him. I think it's a close competitive fight, but I'm going to go with Story. I think he's just, that tough veteran right now that's still just a little bit better than Nelson. But if Nelson can beat Story, I mean, that's the fight he needs, and he'll be in the top 10, right at the edge of the top 10 after that. But I will take Rick Story. I think he grinds out a tough competitive decision. All right, guys. So those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 53, Nelson versus Story. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I guess the video wasn't much shorter at all. Always trying to work on that. But thank you for watching, guys. Please like the video, comment, subscribe. I'll have a recap. I'll try to really hard to have a recap for this and for 178, which takes place in a couple hours here. But yeah, just stay tuned for all my predictions. I think after next weekend we finally get a little bit of a break, 2 weeks before the 179 pay-per-view. But check out my predictions for McDonald versus Safadine. I'll have those up hopefully the same time that this video is up. Thanks, guys. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.